Thank you very much. I've been asked to talk about personalisation and safeguarding. And when we think and talk about the idea of safeguarding, and I think there was a hint of it in the introduction, it's easy for us to place this outside of ourselves as people. It's easy for us to see and describe and think of safeguarding almost as bad things done by horrible people to vulnerable people. And a lot of the definitions and the descriptions and the nature of abuse encourage us as staff and policymakers to think of safeguarding in that context. I want to spend 20 minutes or so just taking a step back a little bit and thinking about, well, let's think about the wider system. Let's think about the system that we are part of as practitioners, as policymakers, as people who use services, or family members of people who use services, and think, well, how does that system best work such that people can enjoy the opportunities of risk, enjoy the value of life as humans, but also be free from undue risks that they're taking and will come to harm. And there's tensions and balances there. And I was struck this morning by a comment that the Minister made. And it was almost, vulnerability and the need for support is coming to you soon. Yeah? And that's kind of important when we think about this stuff, to reflect upon, well, actually, this means me too. This isn't something we can think of in the abstract. And just to kick off, just sharing a very personal experience of when my nan died some 10 years ago now. A wonderful woman, 99, spent her last weeks in a hospital, and in a hospital environment that didn't meet her needs in any way that was respectful or dignified. She ended up malnourished, her medication, blood tests weren't sent off. And the frustration that I had trying to fight that system. And I brought to that time in my life and her life and our family's life an energy and an enthusiasm and a determination that I was never able to muster in all the years I worked as a social worker. Yeah? It was my nan. I loved her, and she was being failed by a system. So I took the call from my father, and I drove down to the hospital that she was in, and my brother was there, and it was clear that the agency staff were rushed and hurried. They weren't caring for her. They were treating her badly, She was very, very poorly cared. So I kind of went and saw the nurses, and I read the Right Act, and I called a ward around, and I said, right, let's have a case conference, my nan, and I was going to sort this out. Yeah, I was going to solve this problem for my nan. Anyway, cut a long story short, despite my best efforts as a fairly competent and insightful practitioner or manager at the time, her care didn't improve. At a point after she died, and my dad was reflecting upon her life, and he said to me, John, what do I do? What do you think I should do here? I said, well, Dad, these are your options. There's a complaints procedure, there's this, and you need to do what you feel is right. And I said, but, a letter to the chief exec, at least. So he wrote to the chief exec, and the chief exec wrote back and several weeks later and said how sorry he was to hear of the poor care of your father when he died in hospital. Now, the reason I recall that point in my life is just a sense of no one individual in that system failed. Yeah? Nobody went out to deliberately harm my nan. Her family didn't reject or neglect her. She needed a high level of support. The environment within which she was cared for was highly regulated. Yet still, her care and support at a time in her life that she needed that support wasn't there. From the healthcare assistant to the chief executive, the system was rotten to the core. And there was no opportunity to step back and think, well, how does this system need to look such that those things don't happen? And regulation and inspection are perhaps part of the answer. But I think, and I would argue, that the answer has to rest within us and understanding our responsibilities to our fellow humans. So that's just a personal reflection on the importance of the issue that we're talking about. And when I'm talking about personalisation and safeguarding, I just want to give you a framework to think about this idea of personal budgets, self-directed support, the ideas that we've been talking about this morning. And to be very clear, because there's tensions when we pass money over for support, it asks questions of us. Whose money is it? What happens if it's not spent in ways that we think are fair and proper and are right? How do we manage that? How do we manage the risks? How do we know that by giving a vulnerable person a personal budget, they don't become exposed to risk by the fact that people see them as having money that they can draw upon? How do we manage that? And this framework here just sets out people, whether they're vulnerable or not, kind of have money, don't they? You know, they have pensions, they have money anyway. So our anxieties about this need to be put in the context that all of us, to varying degrees, have some level of personal wealth and personal money. You know? And I've already commented upon, and I'm sure you will recognise from some of the stories that will have reached here, I guess, about the failures of, or repeated failures of institutionalised care in England, that we can't assume, no matter how well we regulate formal congregate services, that they're going to be safe places. Yeah? We kind of know that they're often they're not. But we also know from our experiences as practitioners and from reading the media that communities as well are dangerous places. Yeah, there's just thinking locally in England, in the recent years, in a county that my family are from, in Cornwall, horrendous abuses in some of the learning disability congregate services, but also deaths resulting from community bullying and victimisation and hate crime. So these things are kind of there, and they happen within congregate provision and regulated services, and they happen in our communities as well. So the argument that sometimes is put forward by some commentators of, am I going forwards or backwards here? Sorry. Of the choice around personalisation and safeguarding as being between, on the one hand, you can either have freedom and choice in a personalised system, but with that comes unhelpful and unnecessary risk, versus an approach to protecting people that's about safeguarding and protecting people from harm by regulation or constraint of control. That tension, I think, is not a simple tension that we can just solve by saying congregate services bad, personalised services good, or the other way around. The dynamics and the relationships are much more complex. There are probably some things that we can do to create the conditions that mean that people can take the opportunities of leading a full and active life, supported as an active citizen, with a personal budget, in a way that doesn't expose people to undue risk. And I just want to tease out, if I can, what some of those things might be. Firstly, this is quite a complex graphic when you first see it, but if I just try and talk you through quite quickly the process. This image represents a process of self-directed support, part of which, and only one part of which, is the person and or their family having control of a budget that's theirs, a personal budget. So the budget in England, as people have implemented self-directed support, hasn't just been the handing over of money and exposing people to the benefits or risks of doing that. It's been one part of a much more sophisticated and considered process. So the person is told how much money they're entitled to, but they are also told what they must receive, what they must achieve with that money. So the money is given over, but we kind of expect you to achieve certain things in your life with that money, and it frames a deal. The person, and we heard this morning, didn't you, people talking about the importance of good planning, are enabled to plan there's an approval process that somebody within the authority says, yes, we are happy with that plan, that is not exposing the person to undue risk, and that it is an appropriate and effective use of public money. The money isn't personal income. It is given to the person in a range of ways. Sometimes it can be given as cash, sometimes it may be paid to a third party or to a provider. So there's a range of ways in which the money can be placed where the person still has control over it, that don't come with the inherent risks of taking hold of the cash. Yeah, so it's a process that can be attuned, and the degree of control that can be devolved to the person or to the person and their family can be adjusted according to the individual circumstances of the person. Is this making some kind of sense to people? I'm seeing a few nods and some people kind of scratching their heads, but do put your hand up and ask a question as we go, okay? So don't feel I have to do all the talking. Yes, this was some descriptions of from an early policy document in England as we moved into implementing personal budgets and self-directed support, a review of our safeguarding guidance, and it just which was called No Secrets, and it illustrates really some of the anxieties and concerns that professionals had at the time. This is 2 or 3 years old now, but folk were worried about the handing over of resources and the risks that would expose either people to or public money to. Yeah, so folk were saying, you're going to make friends with me because I've now got some money that you can take off me, whereas previously I wouldn't have been exposed to that risk. I wouldn't have had the money. Seems a strange worry. You know, I don't want to be rich because if I'm rich, people will want to be with me. But it was a worry, and that people would take families in particular. The concerns were that people would take miss opportunity of that. Now, as we look at, and I'll show in a minute, some a survey of the experiences of social workers. This was the views of social workers before we did it, and then I surveyed a group of social workers afterwards and said, well, what are you really finding here? Is this the case or not? And we'll have a look at that in a second. But these risks didn't seem to manifest themselves from the perspective of those social workers. And that there was risks that once money for support was handed over to local authorities might no longer be able to question or police its use. There's a fantastic little example of that one that I just want to try and share with you. This is a fairly well-known tabloid at home, fairly right-wing tabloid, and they ran it last summer a fantastic story about a person with disabilities who went to a lap dance club with their personal budget, and next to this they put a great big picture of a prostitute, just in case you didn't know what one looked like. But it illustrates that, well, the following morning, the transformation managers, all the phones were going, and the chief execs of the local authorities, do we spend money on this? Do we spend money on this? Yeah? Now, whatever your value judgments on this are, you know, you could quite easily build a coherent argument that says it's perfectly proper and right that a disabled person should have access to the same sorts of facilities as anyone, and justify it. What needed to be clear, I think, that was absent in this story was, well, what's the deal here? What's the conditionality around the resources here? What are you hoping to achieve? And then a clear and detailed and presently understood plan that everybody concerned is kind of happy with. Yeah? But it illustrated the public context and concepts of the undeserving poor, and all sorts of things come in here, don't they, in terms of the use of public money. But it illustrates one of the challenges. One of the other things that's key to stress, I think, is the level of control being appropriate and proportionate to the person and their circumstances. This is a picture of a fella who, when he was the age my daughter is now, started living on the streets of London, and he's my age now. Yeah, so he spent 35 years on the streets of London with the associated difficulties and problems. You know, drug and alcohol misuse, a whole range of frequent contact with the criminal justice system. And he rejected all offers of help and assistance from the traditional service offers, the direct access hostels and the day centres and this kind of thing. And a lot of the offers of support in the city were adversarial in their nature, in that they determined to make street life so difficult that people would move on, and that people would have welfare checks 3 times a night. And the system itself was in effect becoming abusive to solve this problem. One of the things we did when we worked with the guys in the city around personalised pathways off the streets, and more people who've been on the streets for a long time are leaving the streets of London using self-directed support and are being reached by more personalised routes off of the street. We had to think carefully and hard about where the money went. It would be foolish and daft to have given him £4,000, because he would have been mugged, he would have spent it on drugs or whatever. But that was the immediate question of the commissioners. How can you do this? Because they'll get mugged. So we had to think carefully and hard. And what we did was we just said, well, the street worker can hold the money, and what the street worker needs to do is that they need to be available when folk want to talk, when they are coherent, when they are sober, when they want to engage, and then they can play. But there was a whole range of other places and ways that you can place the money with the person or a friend or their family with another organisation. That means that you achieve a good personalised support plan, and the flexibility of the resource is there. The money's there, it's liquid, you can use it, you can put it into plans and make plans a reality without necessarily exposing individuals to undue risk. I'm being waved at in terms of time, and I promised you I would tell you a little bit about what social workers then said to us when the consultation was around. Remember, they were saying, well, we were kind of worried that people will be attracted to the idea of befriending vulnerable people and taking their money off them, and we couldn't police how the money was being used. Quite recently, 6 months or so ago, I invited the social workers in a northern borough to take a survey of their experiences of working with people with personal budgets, just to check out what's working, what's not working. And from the 38 quite detailed responses that we had, one person mentioned that they were anxious still about this issue. Okay, so it's still there, somebody mentioned it, but it wasn't a dominant factor in people's responses. People were worried about the bureaucracy of the process, the paperwork, all the things we talked about this morning. They seem to be less anxious about the safeguarding and the risk management. And again, in terms of the statistical responses, the green stuff is it helped, and the blue stuff is it made no difference. So a very balanced picture there in terms of this was about managing risks and social workers' experience of that. So really, that group of people not saying that this is a real issue. We can manage personal budgets and manage risks is the response, I think. This is important, and I just want to maybe close on this one. We talked to 2,000 recipients of personal budgets, people themselves and their families. And we analysed their responses against a whole set of outcome domains. And I also, for my sins, I put in a little free text response to the survey. And it was only a tiny box on the survey, but I then had to read through and trawl through. It was about 800 essays of life. That sometimes I was in tears of joy, and sometimes I was in tears of sadness reading. And the things that we talked about and we asked about. But what struck me about this, we asked clearly in our questionnaire about people feeling safe, and we had findings about where people felt that. People talked about a whole range of things, but nobody said, actually, having a personal budget is making me feel, I'm really worried about that. I'm really worried about the risks that the social workers were worried about at the beginning. So people themselves weren't talking about these issues. In terms of the outcomes for care, and just thinking back to when I started, reflecting upon the care and support that Manang didn't get properly, the green stuff is folk talking about the experience of having a personal budget and whether things got better. The dark green stuff has got a lot better, and the grey stuff is not working at all. Is no difference, and the red stuff it's got worse. Across all different social care groups, across a whole range of being as independent as you like, being in control of your life, your mental well-being, supported with dignity. Repeatedly, people saying things were working for them. Okay, thank you.
It's like green and the red. What do you mean about worse? Have it got better?
This was a retrospective questionnaire, and we asked people, since you took control of the personal budget, how has life changed? Has it got better? Has it stayed the same? Has it got worse? A very simple 5-point measure, and it was just really to illustrate, yes, there's issues for some people, and we need to work on those, and let's not deny them, let's understand where they are and work on them. But in terms of the anxieties that we started with, up here, wherever they've gone, I guess the key message is you can find a way to do this without exposing people to undue, unnecessary risk, and it can be very helpful.
Was there a thing done beforehand to see, before they got the direct funding, was there a comparison or not?
It was
those lines like that.
Yeah, no, people made their own judgment of, had the questions were shaped such that since you've had it, how have things changed?
Okay.
Yeah, so we just did a 1 point, but we asked people themselves, and we just accepted. If they said the dignity and support had improved, that was good enough for the survey. We said, yeah, it's improved. If you say it's improved, it's improved. You know, it was as simple as that. So it wasn't a clinical trial, as Caroline was talking about this morning, but it was a fairly extensive survey across 10 local authorities, 2,000 people, and I think the key message really is a lot of process issues came up, but in terms of quality of life, it's worth pursuing.